The Times can reveal, this is an interesting update on what's been going on in the Channel, that people from India are now the third largest contingent of migrants who've crossed the Channel in small boats so far this year. Harjap Singh Bhangal joins me now. He's an immigration lawyer. Harjap, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Let's deal with first things first, really. When it comes to these migrant hotels, etc., the Pontoons holiday camp, I think, was a visible symbol. That's now not going to be used in Merseyside. Do you think there's any case whatsoever that local residents should be able to have a vote on whether or not they want one of these hotels popping up in their area?
Well, essentially, yes. I think it's not a bad idea for the residents to have a say as to what goes on in the area. That's what they elect councillors for. That's what they're MPs for. And people are free to lobby their MPs and councillors how they feel fit. But the reason we need to have a look at is how and why these hotels are popping up. It's because the asylum seekers aren't allowed to work. Otherwise, they can work and pay their own way, like everyone else does in the UK. However, the fact that we don't let them work, therefore they have to be housed by us and have to be paid for by us, that's what is the crux of the problem. If they were given a work until their claims are assessed, which we know can take up to 2 years, we would not have to pay for them to be housed. In fact, they can pay for their own rent and they can pay tax and help the economy.
One of the arguments against that, which I'm sure you're aware of, would be we are seeing distressing cases. Yes, they're a minority, but they are distressing cases nonetheless of people who are asylum seekers claiming to be refugees, etc., who've come over the Channel, who've gone on to commit pretty heinous crimes. If our vetting procedure isn't good enough, then actually, realistically, it's not safe either, one would imagine, to essentially release them out into the community at large to work.
Well, like you said, it's a minority. But the fact is, if that was the case, we wouldn't allow prisoners to go out of prison and go back and be rehabilitated or join normal society again. The fact is that the majority of them aren't criminals, asylum seekers, despite what the media says. It's a very small minority, and we're always at liberty to keep them detained. But to keep people who are fit and able to work detained and pay for them and say, right, you can't work, we're going to pay for you, the British public is going to pay for you. When they're fit able, they can work, they can get a job, they can pay tax and pay their own rent. It just doesn't make sense.
I do understand that. I think my point was a little bit more nuanced, Harjap, because in the case of an individual who we reported on earlier this week, we appeared unable to detect that he had been found guilty of a double murder, for example, in Serbia. We were unable to say that he'd been found guilty of drug offences in at least 2 European countries, as far as we can tell. And so I suppose if we don't know the backstory, that was more that I was getting at. Whereas, as you said, with prisoners, we do know the backstory. We know that they've been convicted of an offence over here and that maybe they can go through some rehabilitation plan. I mean, would you be against a local area saying, all right, well, if we vote on it and we vote for a migrant hotel, then we would also be happy to have people who are in that hotel working in our local economy?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the fact boils down to what people's complaint is about the amount we're spending on these hotels. I mean, that essentially is it, and why there is a need for it. The solution is to let the people staying in the hotels work, go and find their own job. To get a job, they'll need to clear a DBS anyway, and they need to clear a criminal record check. And the employer is responsible for them, for paying them. Yes, we don't know the backstory of everyone, but the fact is they're already here. It's a bit too late to discuss backstories when we've already let them in. So
no, indeed. And we are going to be returning throughout the course of this show to that Pontoons Hotel in Merseyside anyway, which is now, as we understand it, not going to be used by the Home Office. There was local opposition to it, but frankly, there's been local opposition to plenty of areas. Some of them have caved, some of them have not. But can you just update me on the other, I suppose, breaking in a way, angle today, which is that supposedly Indians are now making up the third largest contingent of people coming across the Channel. I was quite surprised at that, really. I mean, we give quite a lot of foreign aid to India. It's a massive economy, for example. Why are so many people now seeking to come across the Channel?
It's not just now, Patrick. The Indians have been coming since the year 2000. They've always been in the top 5 groups of migrants to the UK for the past 20 years. And they've also always been in the top 5 groups of people who overstay their visas. So we know that there's a problem with Indian people who come here into visas and overstay, and Indian people who are amongst groups of people crossing the Channel. Our focus recently has been on Albania. However, you know, it doesn't mean just because Albania's at number 1, we need to ignore number 2, 3, 4 and 5.